Hey, I'm back. Good to see you. And today I want to, or this video anyway, I want to talk to you about the fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm, the original version, not the Disney version, of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. As you're listening to this video, as I read you the story, I want you to write down how many times 7 is used in the story versus, say, 13. Now, 13 for pagans was a sacred number. But as Christianity spread into the countryside areas, which it took longer, then 13 was abandoned and considered unlucky. So if you've ever slept in a hotel that is a high-rise, you'll notice there's never a 13th floor. Or gone into a place of business that is a high-rise, there's no 13th floor. What I'm wondering is, what the hell are the people doing when they skip the floor and they go from 12 to 14? People on the 4th floor are in trouble, I guess, huh? However, if you think about a baker's dozen, you don't get 12 donuts from a baker's dozen. What you get is 13 donuts or 13 rolls. And that continues to this day. So these Brothers Grimm fairy tales are a fusion of pagan and Christian concepts. So this is the story of Snow White. I also want you to look up, before you continue this video, the concept of 7 deadly sins. So I want you to look up the concept of 7 deadly sins and 7 virtues. Because this, my friends, is proto-psychology, meaning psyche. Psyche means the mind, trying to figure out how the mind works. Proto meaning first. 7 deadly sins, the idea of it, and the 7 virtues, the good things. So 7 bad things, I guess I should do that, and 7 good things is an early way for people to understand why people do what they do. And I want you to apply the idea of 7 deadly sins to the stepmother and see how many she fulfills, and the idea of virtues and see how many Snow White embodies. Obviously, white in Western culture has a long history of being good. I wonder why that would be. Can you imagine if you lived in Nigeria, if white would represent goodness? Or if you lived in South Africa? But here is the story, and I hope you enjoy it. Once again, it's the original version, not the Disney version. So you'll have to determine whether or not your kids can listen to this reading of it. Once upon a time, in midwinter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven, a queen sat sewing at her window, which was framed of black ebony wood. And she looked at the snow and pricked her finger with her needle, and 3 drops fell into the snow. So think about why 3 would be an issue here. In Western culture, 3 is a shorthand for Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The red on the white looked so beautiful that she thought to herself that she wanted to have a child as white as snow, white, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in the frame. Soon afterwards, she had a little daughter who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony, and therefore she called her Snow White. And as soon as the child was born, this is how we have it in fairy tales, as soon as the child was born, the queen died. A year later, the queen took himself another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant. So look at the 7 deadly sins, okay? Proud and arrogant, and she could not stand if anyone might surpass her in beauty. She had a magic mirror. And what do we say commonly? The mirror never lies, right? She had a magic mirror, and every morning she stood before it and looked at herself. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? Can you imagine needing that kind of support to wake up in the morning, where you have to have someone say, "You are the most beautiful"? To this the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." And fairest in this case means beautiful. Then the queen was satisfied, for she knew that the mirror spoke the truth. Snow White grew up and became ever more beautiful. And I want you to take notes on this. When she was 7, can you imagine when a child is 7? When she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the light of day, and even more beautiful than the queen herself. One day the queen asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is in this land is fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair. You, my queen, are beautiful. It is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times more beautiful or fairer than you." The queen took fright and turned yellow and green with envy, and from that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart turned over inside her body, so great was her hatred for the girl. So think about this. The idea that you have a mom competing with a child. And I guess I should do it this way. Mom versus a child. The envy and pride grew ever greater like a weed in her heart, and she had no peace day and night. Then she summoned a huntsman and said to him, and a huntsman is someone who hunts, right? "Take Snow White out into the woods. I never want to see her again. Kill her. And as proof that she's dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me." Now other translations say, "and bring her heart back to me." So this queen is a child gobbler. I mean, we're talking about the worst step parent in history right here, right? I want to eat her. once you've killed her. Now, this might be an example of her being lazy because she won't kill herself. She just wants to eat her up. She's a child gobbler, just like Kronos, just like the big bad wolf. The huntsman obeyed and took Snow White into the woods, and we're talking about a 7-year-old child. He took out his hunting knife and was about to stab her in her innocent heart when Snow White began to cry, saying, "Oh, dear huntsman, please let me live. I will run into the wild woods and never come back." It's quite a decision for a 7-year-old, right? Because she was so beautiful, the huntsman took pity on her and he said, "Run away, poor child." But he also thought, the wild animals will devour her anyway. So we have one line where it looks like the huntsman is a nice guy. On the other hand, he's like, the animals will do my job for me. But still, it was as if a stone had fallen from his heart because he didn't have to kill her. Just then, a young boar, so a pig, right? So now we have a child being replaced by a pig, which it's interesting to me because this story was written and told for hundreds and hundreds of years, written down just a couple hundred years ago or 125 years ago. But the pig takes the child's place. And doctors use pig organs, especially the ventricles from the pigs in their hearts, to help people today. Because pigs are the closest genetically to people, not chimpanzees or orangutans or gorillas, okay? But the most compatible genetically. So just then a young boar came running, and he killed it, cut out its lungs and liver, and took them back to the queen as proof of Snow White's death. And the cook boiled them with salt, and the woman ate them, supposing she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. So can't you see her? My stepdaughter. The poor child was now all alone in the great forest, and she was so afraid that she just looked at all the leaves on the trees and didn't know what to do. Then she began to run. She ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and wild animals jumped at her, but they did not harm her. She ran as fast as her feet could carry her, and just as evening was about to fall, she saw a little house and went inside in order to rest. So here we have Snow White. Breaking and entering, which, in today's parlance, would put the 7-year-old in jail. And I'm not kidding about that 7, because every year, at least twice a year since I moved to Florida 18 years ago, maybe it's 17, I don't know, I read stories about police handcuffing children in elementary school. But she breaks and enters, and let's find out what she does. Inside the house, everything was small, but it was so neat and clean that no one could say otherwise. There was a little table with a white tablecloth, and now I want you to keep track of the list of 7s. There was a little table with a white tablecloth and 7 little plates, and each plate had a spoon, so 7 spoons. And there were 7 knives and forks and 7 mugs as well. Against the wall, there were 7 beds, all standing in a row covered with snow white sheets. Because she was so hungry and thirsty, okay, so if you had been running away from wild animals all day, after you were going to be killed because your stepmother hated you. And you're very, very hungry, and the meal is laid out for you. Wouldn't you just sit down and eat from one plate? But no, it's a fairy tale. So, because she was so hungry and thirsty, Snow White ate a few vegetables and a little bread from each plate, and from each mug she drank a drop of wine. And what happens to a 7-year-old who has had 7 sips of wine? I'm pretty sure it's nappy time. Afterwards, because she was so tired, she lay down on a bed. But none of them felt right. One was too long, the other too short, until finally the 7th one was just right. She remained lying in it, entrusted herself to God, and fell asleep. Now, I want you to think of another fairy tale that you grew up with about someone. This bed is too small. This bed is too hard. This chair is too soft. This chair is too big. And then you will think of the more modern story of the 3 bears and Goldilocks, blonde Goldilocks. And scientists right now astrophysicists talk about finding a Goldilocks planet, and that's a planet that's not too hot and not too cold, but just right for human habitation. Excuse me. After dark, the masters, and imagine this, the masters, this word. I don't know if you know any masters. Jonathan Swift said in the opening of his novel, anyway, I'll get back to that. It will come to me in just a second. Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. That he called him my good Mr. Bates, my good Mr. Master Bates. So here we have this young girl laying down in the house of these masters, 7 of them, right? And they returned home, and they were the 7 dwarfs who picked and dug for ore or gold in the mountain. They lit their 7 candles, and as soon as it was lit light in their house, they saw someone had been there, for not everything was in the same order they had left it. Can you imagine crumbs on 7 plates? Parts of vegetables. And now we can see what they care about, right? The first one said, "Who's been sitting in my chair?" And the second one, "Who's been eating from my plate?" The third one, "Who's been eating my bread?" The fourth one, "Who's been eating my vegetables?" The fifth, "Who's been sticking with my fork?" He must be like the finicky clean one, right? The sixth, "Who's been cutting with my knife?" He must also be finicky. The seventh, what would it be? "Who has been drinking from my mug?" The 7th one is looking forward to the wine at night. Then the first one saw that there was a little imprint in his bed and said, "Who stepped on my bed?" The others came running and shouted, "Someone's been lying in mine as well." But the 7th one, looking at his bed, found Snow White lying there asleep. The 7 dwarfs all came running, and they cried out with amazement. They fetched their 7 candles and shone the light on Snow White. "Oh, good heaven! Oh, good heaven! This child is so beautiful." They were so happy that they did not wake her up. Now, in normal life, if you have a guest in your house, and you don't have enough beds, what would you do? I think that probably you could share a bed or have someone sleep on a couch. But this is a fairy tale, and so we can't have the simplest solution. They did not wake her up, but they let her continue to sleep there in the bed. The seventh dwarf had to sleep with his companions, 1 hour with each one, until the night was done. So can you imagine? That seventh dwarf is like, the alarm clock goes off, and he goes and disturbs someone else while they're sleeping, and then it goes off an hour later, and he goes and disturbs the next one until they were done. The next morning, Snow White woke up, and when she saw the 7 dwarfs, she was frightened. But they were friendly and asked, "What is your name?" "My name is Snow White." "How did you find your way to our house?" Then she told them that her stepmother had tried to kill her, and that the huntsman had spared her life, and that she had run the entire day finally coming to their house. And the dwarf said, "So they sound nice, right? Here's the contract for a 7-year-old to be in a house of 7 men, though. If you will keep our house and cook, make beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly." So, keep our house, cook, make beds, wash, sew, knit, and orderly. 7 lists on her job offer here. "Then you can stay with us, and you'll have everything that you want." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart." That's why it's better than other translations where her stepmom eats her heart, her supposed heart. So she kept house for them. Every morning they went to the mountains looking for ore and gold. In the evening when they came back home, their meal had to be ready. During the day the girl was alone, so she kept house for them. The good dwarfs warned her, saying, "Be very careful about your stepmother. She will soon know that you're here, and do not let anyone in." Now the queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver, must have been delicious, right? Could only think that she was again the first and most beautiful of all women. She stepped before the mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of them all?" And the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true. But Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is still 1,000 times fairer than you." Sometimes don't you want the mirror to shut up? This startled the queen, for she knew the mirror did not lie, and she realized that the huntsman had deceived her, and that Snow White was still alive. Then she thought and thought again how she could kill Snow White, for as long as she was not the most beautiful woman in the entire land, her envy would give her no rest. At last she thought of something. Coloring her face, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman. So she's disguising herself as a crone to go after a maiden, right? And she is a mother. So that no one would recognize her. In this disguise, she went to the house of the 7 dwarfs and knocked on the door. And she called out, "Beautiful wares for sale, for sale." And Snow White peered out the window and said, "Good day, dear woman. What do you have for sale?" "Good wares, bodice laces in all colors." Now, bodice is for, right here. And she's talking to a 7-year-old. And she took out one that was braided from colorful silk. "Would you like this one?" "I can let that honest woman in," thought Snow White. And she unbolted the door, and she bought the pretty bodice lace, or bodice, depending on how you want to pronounce it. "Child, how you look! Come, let me lace you up properly." So this is very funny because here we have this queen, stepmom, criticizing Snow White for not being dressed properly. The unsuspecting Snow White stood before her and let her do up the new lace. But the old woman pulled so quickly and so hard that Snow White could not breathe. And then the old woman said, "You used to be the most beautiful one," and hurried away. So we call that death by lacing up. All right. Notice, again, the number 3. Let's find out how many times Snow White dies in the story. Not long afterward, in the evening, the 7 dwarfs came home. How terrified they were when they saw their dear Snow White lying on the ground. Because, they're thinking, who the fuck's going to be doing the laundry? Who will cook my meals? Who will serve my drinks? All right? But, and Snow White was not moving at all, as though she were dead. They lifted her up, and seeing that she was too tightly laced, they cut the lace in two. Then Snow White began to breathe a little, and little by little, she came back to life. When the dwarfs heard what happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was no one else but the godless queen. Take care and let no one in when we're not with you." When the wicked woman returned home, she went to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in the land is fairest of all?" And the mirror answered once again, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true. But Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is still 1,000 times fairer than you." When she heard this, all her blood ran to her heart, because she knew that Snow White had come back to life. "This time I shall think of something that will destroy you." Then, with the art of witchcraft, which she understood, she made a poison comb. Now, I'm not talking about something that combs your hair back like this. I'm talking about a comb that props it up more like this up top, okay? That kind of comb. Then she disguised herself, taking the form of a different old woman, another crone, right? Thus she went across the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs, knocked on the door, and called out, "Good wares for sale, for sale." Snow White looked out and said, "Go on your way, I'm not allowed to let anyone in." Looks like she's learned her lesson, right? "You certainly may look," said the old woman, pulling out the poison comb and holding it up. The child liked it so much that she let herself be deceived. So this is this idea in this story. Deception. And maybe you guys have met somebody like this stepmom. The child liked it so much she let herself be deceived. She opened the door. After they'd agreed on the purchase, the old woman said, and once again it's a criticism, "Now let me comb your hair properly." She had barely stuck the comb into Snow White's hair when the poison took effect, and the girl fell down unconscious. "You specimen of beauty," said the wicked woman. "Now you're finished." And she walked away. I'm telling you, this is a stepmother from hell, right? Fortunately, it was almost evening. The 7 dwarfs came home. When they saw that Snow White was lying on the ground as if she were dead, they immediately suspected her stepmother. They examined her and found the poison comb. They had scarcely pulled it out when Snow White came to herself again and told them what happened. Once again, they warned her to be on guard and not to open the door for anyone. Now, in any narrative, for it to go on, for the story to continue, any warnings must be broken, right? So like in any horror film you can imagine, don't go into the dark. Don't go over here. In order for a story to happen, if someone said, "Oh, okay, I won't open the door ever again. No more story. I won't go into the dark. No more story." Back at home, the queen stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair. It's true. But Snow White beyond the mountain with the 7 dwarfs is still 1,000 times fairer than you." When the queen heard the mirror saying this, she shook and she trembled with anger. "Snow White shall die," she shouted, "even if it costs me my life." Then she went into her most secret room. No one else was allowed inside, and she made a poisoned apple. From outside it was beautiful, with white with red cheeks, and anyone who saw it would want it, but anyone who might eat a little piece of it would die. So I want you to think about this idea. Always, whenever you hear in a story an apple being brought up, you need to think of the myth of Adam and Eve. Because even though it doesn't say it in the Bible, what do we call this part of a man's neck? An Adam's apple. Because the oral tradition around it was that it was an apple, and when Adam ate on it, he choked. And so that's why men's stick out bigger than women's necks. Then, coloring her face, she disguised herself as a peasant woman and thus went across the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs. She knocked on the door. Snow White stuck her head out the window and said, "I'm not allowed to let anyone in. The dwarfs have forbidden me to do so." "That's all right. I'll easily get rid of my apples. Here, I'll give you one of them." So beware of women bearing false apples. "No," said Snow White. "I cannot accept anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" By the way, what's one of the urban myths we have today at Halloween? That there are razors and apples. I'm 55 years old. I don't know if emergency rooms do this anymore, but when I was growing up, and as of when my kids were growing up, and I never took them to do this, x-ray technicians in hospitals would actually x-ray Halloween loot or candies to see if there was a razor inside an apple, as if you could make that happen without being able to see it. I think it still goes on to this day. So, you got to worry about those apples. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but an apple with a razor or with poison, it will kill you fucking dead, you know? "Here, I'll give you one of them." "No, I cannot accept anything." "Afraid of poison?" "Look, I'll cut the apple in 2. You eat the red half, and I'll eat the white half." Now the apple had been so artfully made that only the red half was poisoned. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and when she saw that the peasant woman was eating part of it, she could no longer resist and stuck her hand out and took the poisoned half. She barely had bit it in her mouth when she fell to the ground dead. The queen looked at her with a gruesome laugh and stare, and loudly said, "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. This time the dwarfs cannot awaken you." Back at home she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of all?" It finally answered, "You, my queen. are fairest of all. Now, if we stop the story at this point, we would have a beginning, a middle, and an end, because Snow White's dead. But we want stories with happy endings, and we want bad people to be punished. And so it's not the place to end the story. So let's find out what happens. Then her envious heart was at rest, as well as an envious heart can be. When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White lying on the ground. She was not breathing at all. She was dead. They lifted her up and looked for something poisonous. They undid her laces. They combed her hair. They washed her with water and wine. Nothing helped. And these are actions that people take when preparing a body of someone who is dead, right? Washing the body, anointing it. The dear child was dead, and she remained dead. They laid her on a bier. And it's important that you understand what a bier is. A bier is not a beer. A bier is a place to lay a body. So if you've ever been to a funeral, the cart that people bring in with the body, the coffin on top of it, that's a bier. This is what's being talked about right here. Not laying herself on a can of Budweiser. So they laid her on a bier, and all seven sat next to her and mourned her and cried for how many days? 3 days. They were going to bury her, but she still looked as fresh as a living person and still had her beautiful red cheeks. And so they said, "We cannot bury her in the black earth." And they had a transparent glass coffin made so that she could be seen from all sides. Can you imagine doing that on your property or where you live? Someone that you love, or someone who was a worker at your house, in this case, dies, and you're like, you know what? I'm thinking glass coffin so I can see from all sides. If you don't find that creepy, I think something's wrong with you. They laid her inside with golden letters written on it with her name, and that said that she was a princess. Then they put the coffin outside on a mountain, and one of them always stayed and watched over her. The animals too came and mourned for Snow White. First an owl, then a raven, finally a dove. Now, these birds in Western culture, our culture, are very symbolic. An owl is known for wisdom. A raven is known for death. And a dove is known for peace. So I suggest to you that if you look at the 5 stages of grieving, that this is a prototype of that, where you find out someone's died and maybe deny it because they are dead, and so you have to reconcile that, and then eventually you come to peace. Snow White lay there in the coffin a long, long time, and she did not decay, but looked like she was asleep, for she was still as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black-haired as ebony wood. Which is interesting because the whole funeral industry in the United States, besides making money off of people's grief, it wants people to believe when they see their dead loved ones that they're just sleeping. They just look like they're sleeping. My nephew, Jeremiah, died when he was 3. He got killed. He got hung in a car window, or hanged. And when his twin brother, who was 3 years old at the time, went to the viewing, he said, "He looks like he's sleeping." He wasn't sleeping, he was dead. I'm not dissing Zechariah, But that's what the funeral industry wants you to think, is that now you're asleep. Okay, so we have the 7-year-old body. Once again, 7, remember that. Laying there in a glass coffin, being stared at by old men, 7 dwarfs. Old short men, I guess you could say. And now it came to pass that a prince entered these woods, and happened on the dwarf's house. Dun, 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 dun. We have a prince, so the prince will fix everything, right? Let's find out what the prince's motives are. We're not talking about a little boy of 7. We're talking about a grown man who is a prince. And he sought shelter there for the night, and he saw the coffin on the mountain with beautiful Snow White in it, and he read what was written on it with golden letters. Then he said to the dwarfs, as anybody would say when seeing a dead 7-year-old, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you anything you want." Okay, so what do we call an object that somebody gets because they have money? Or has achieved something. But this person only achieves his birth. We have a trophy. What do we call an old man with a younger woman? And what do we call that old man's wife? You have a literal trophy wife. So I'll give you anything. But the dwarfs answered, "We will not sell it for all the gold in the world." So at this point in the story, Snow White has become it. And so when we think the dwarfs right now, we're like, go dwarfs! Even though you're creepy old men, go dwarfs! But then the prince said, "Then give it to me, for I cannot live without being able to see Snow White. I will honor her and respect her as my most cherished one." What the hell is he going to do with a child in a coffin? As he thus spoke, the good dwarfs felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. The prince had his servants. Okay, so he didn't carry her away. Servants did. Carry it away on their shoulders. But then it happened that one of them stumbled on some brush, and this dislodged from Snow White's throat the piece of poisoned apple that she'd bitten off, and not long afterwards she opened her eyes, lifted the lid from her coffin, sat up, and lo and behold, she was alive again. "Good heavens!" she cried out. Which, I think that's shock. It's like, what the hell am I doing in a coffin? All right? Where am I? And the prince said joyfully, "You are with me." He told her what had happened and then said, "I love you more than anything else in the world. Come with me to my father's castle. You shall become my wife." All right, he's never talked to her, right? I'm sure some of you have had this happen, where somebody you barely are getting to know says, "I love you." And usually that means they want something from you. I love your money. I love your power. I love your reputation. Whatever. But so, here the 7-year-old is going to become my wife. Snow White loved him and she went with him. Okay. I can't emphasize enough that she's 7 years old. Their wedding was planned with great splendor and majesty. Snow White's godless stepmother was also invited to the feast, and after putting on her beautiful clothes, she stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but the young queen is 1,000 times fairer than you." Hold on, let me get up. Oops. The wicked woman uttered a curse, and she became so frightened that she did not know what to do. At first, she did not want to go to the wedding. But she found no peace. She had to go and see the young queen. When she arrived, she recognized Snow White, and terrorized, she could only stand there without moving. That could be the end of the story, right? But we want comeuppance as humans. We want the villain to be punished. I think there are more than one in this story, but the master villain is the stepmom, right? The queen. Then they put a pair of iron shoes into burning coals. So imagine this. Think about this as being iron. And then, in heating it up, the shoes were brought forth with tongues and placed before her, and she was forced to step into the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. I hope you've enjoyed this story.